Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all here. We've got quite an packed agenda and more of that in a minute for this morning, but we do have a break. Some really interesting papers, a mixture between use of new technology to support both identification of crime through some forensic applications, some applications in terms of policing, and we also have a look at training and developing skills going forward, and a discussion at the end to hopefully help us to get a better idea of what it is that you want from the group, what you want in terms of development opportunities from CIFA going forward, so that we can put that into our plan. But what I'll do first, before our first speakers, is give you a quick roundup of basically what's been going on for the last year and a bit since this special interest group was formed. So for those who don't know me, I'm Paul Jeffrey. My daytime job is as the National Listing Manager at Historic England. I'm also a heritage crime advisor, particularly focusing on marine at Historic England, and have worked very closely with Mark Harrison, who will be speaking later, in developing our work in England alongside police forces and others. I am the current chair of the special interest group, hence the fact that I find myself here in front of you. So I'll share my screen now, and let's just check that that's going to work. Okay. And there we go. So I'll share now. Can you just confirm that that's sharing?
Yes, we've got that there. Thank you, Paul.
Perfect. Okay. So the Heritage Crime Special Interest Group was launched a little over a year and a bit ago. And during that time, we've done quite a lot to bring in both archaeologists, people with an interest in heritage management, whether that be properties or museums, and also colleagues from the various law enforcement agencies. Let's move that slide on. This morning, I'm going to give you a brief background. We're then going to have Superintendent Tom Holmes from Devon and Cornwall Police talking about some really interesting developments that they've been making there to help the police to better understand when crime is affecting heritage assets and to respond more effectively.
Sorry, Paul. We've lost the correct slide.
Which slide are you on?
So we're on the main slide still, the intro slide.
Oh, that's interesting.
Agenda, and we're in the view mode rather than the.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, that's weird because it's okay. Well, let me come out and try sharing again, see if we can get the right.
Yeah. Don't want to mess up your flow. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem at all. Right. Okay. Let's try. For some reason, that's. I'm not sure why that's doing that. Let me just come out of that and try it again. Right. Let's try and. Yeah, it's not showing me the. For some reason, it's not showing me the right screen. Let me just come out of that. Okay, is that showing now?
No, I'm not seeing that at this point.
That's okay. That's really weird. How about that? Is that working?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, which slide are you seeing? Are you seeing the first slide?
Yes, the first slide.
Okay, let's see if we can get it to show.
There we go. Back on
Excellent.
track.
Okay, apologies for that. Not normally a Zoom user, so I'm obviously doing something wrong. So yeah, the agenda today, a little bit of an update from me, then Superintendent Tom Holmes from Devon and Cornwall Police, as I mentioned. Then we've got Mark Harrison and the Spectre team from Loughborough who will be talking through some really interesting work that they're doing. We'll then have a short break. We'll then have Aileen Nash looking at skills matrix development and future training needs, and we'll be wanting some input from you. And then we've got a panel discussion at the end where any questions that you have either about any of the content this morning or about anything else related to CIFA's role with heritage crime and your aspirations about what we might be able to do for you in this field, we can cover then. And then the session will close at 12 in time for lunch. So that's the agenda, as I say, for the morning going forward. So what have we been up to? So basically, during the last year, back in April, for those of you who were able to attend, we had a very successful conference session and stand, and it was great to see not just archaeologists, but police officers and security consultants and others from a range of backgrounds who manage and deal with heritage crime in its whole variety of forms. Those conference sessions are available, as hopefully you'll know and have seen if you weren't able to attend, via our group page, and I'll mention that again in a minute. And on the left-hand side here is the banner that the group has. So if you have events or you're attending events anywhere where you might be able to promote the Heritage Crime Group and the work that we're doing in partnership with other bodies, then that and other materials are available. So also during the last year, we've had a range of publications. We had the summer edition of the Archaeologist focused on heritage crime. Again, hopefully you'll have read that. It'll have come through to you. If you haven't, then it is available again on our page, and the address of the page is at the bottom there. We also have a CIFA Heritage Crime leaflet, which is available for providing at events and sharing, and that's been developed by the committee. And we've had a range of other publications, so an article in the Professional Mountaineer magazine. We also have a future edition of Historic Environment Policy and Practice, which will be focused on heritage crime next year, and an article early next year in the Society of Museum Archaeologists magazine as well. So we're trying to get the word out there. But again, if you have connections with audiences outside of heritage, where heritage crime is a factor, and you're able to promote that, or you can give us details so that we can put something together, then please do. The more that we can spread the word, and the more that we can get other people aware of the issues of heritage crime and also aware of how to report it, then that's really important, because at the moment one of the issues still is that people don't recognise necessarily that the crime that's affecting them, be it antisocial behaviour, criminal damage or theft, is a heritage crime when it is. And as you'll know if you've read the articles, one of the key things in England and Wales is that where other offences such as arson or theft occur and affect heritage assets, then the sentencing guidelines mean that on prosecution there can be an uplift in the sentencing. So it's really important that it's recognised as a heritage crime as early on in the process as possible, to make sure that that can be dealt with effectively if and when somebody is found guilty of an offence. We're also working with partners to develop joint guidance and practice. The first of those is going to be a CIFA, National Police Chiefs Council and Arch partnership guidance for police volunteers in heritage crime. That's currently, it's been cleared by the National Police Chiefs Council. It's currently going through the process within CIFA, and then will need to be put together. But we're hoping that in not too long, that will be available again on the web page, and we'll be able to share that through National Police Chiefs Council and other websites as well. That's really important because the Heritage Crime Special Interest Group is primarily about partnership and about bringing together heritage professionals and police officers and creating a common understanding in how to prevent and how to investigate and how to flag and signpost people in relation to heritage crime. So it's not an internal group in the way that some others are. It's very much focused on external partnership and building that understanding. And we've been doing that through this guidance. So we're really pleased. It's a really big step to have the National Police Chiefs Council alongside CIFA supporting and jointly badging this guidance, and hopefully there'll be other guidance following on from that. We also have a number of conferences and events we'll be attending. The most exciting of which is that just this week we've been offered a free stand at the Emergency Services Show in Birmingham next year at the NEC. So save those dates, 17th and 18th of September. 16,000 people from police, fire service and other emergency and rescue services attend the conference, along with providers of equipment and technology. To have a stand there for the CIFA SIG and to share alongside fire and police colleagues that we work with an understanding and awareness, but also some of the best practice that you'll be seeing this morning is really important. It's a really important new audience for us. Fire service is an area that we're expanding into working with. We've worked with the police in a number of ways so far, as you've seen, but obviously prevention of heritage crime and making sure that the fire service have the right information if things like arson or accidental fire happen on historic properties is really important too. So it's important for us to have access to those people and senior people from those services. So a really exciting development, more news on that between now and then, but keep an eye on the page because we'll be updating as we go. And again, if you know of any other conferences where you think there might be an audience, it doesn't have to be a heritage one necessarily, that we can provide a speaker to, then please do let us know and we can do that. Or if you're speaking, then we can provide you with materials and sort of up-to-date information to help you with that. So really important. Again, I keep saying it and I'll keep on saying it and bore myself as well as you saying it, but we really do need to be out there promoting the importance of recognizing heritage crime to be able to prevent it. And prevention is always better than cure. So, you know, we do have to investigate crimes, obviously, when they happen with our colleagues in the police and other agencies. But the more we can do to prevent it happening in the first place has to be the main priority and has to be the best outcome. So that's kind of the key activities and messages of what we've been up to so far this year. Just get that. Again, here, just if you want to make a note, I've put it in the chat, is the timetable for this morning. So I'll stop sharing my screen now and we'll see. Tom Holmes, are you there?
I have not seen him in yet.
Yes, I am.
Oh,
I probably appear on my shoulder number, not as mine. So
That's the issue.
Excellent. Good morning, Tom. Good to see you. If you'd like to share your screen when you're ready, then we'll go into introductions and so on in a moment. Just while Superintendent Tom Holmes is doing that, I'd just like to say we're really pleased to have him here this morning to talk about some really exciting work that Devon and Cornwall Police have been leading on recently. It's really good of you to come because I know you're very busy and have a lot on. So we really are grateful. So when you're ready, I'll hand over to you.
I am doing my very best to get this to present in Teams at the moment, or present even. So just talk amongst yourselves for a moment.
Yep, absolutely. Are there any questions so far, or any observations? I'm just trying to find my chat button.
Tom, there should be a green button in the middle of your bar at the bottom that should allow you to do the screen sharing you need.
Okay. Is that working? Because for me, it says I'm sharing.
We're not seeing any sharing yet.
Okay.
Have you selected which screen to share?
Yeah, I've been at an incident since 5 o'clock, so I've had to run to the nearest police station. I'm doing it off my laptop. So I show presenter view. How's that? Are you seeing that?
It's not coming through yet.
Okay. Just tell me again what button you think. So I'm in PowerPoint, hoping to share it into Zoom.
So then you need to go back to the Zoom screen.
Yeah.
And in the bottom of the Zoom bar, there should be a green button with an arrow that says share.
Got it. Got it.
From there, you should be able to select which screen you'd like to share.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
My apologies. It's been a bit of a hectic morning, so I do apologise. Right? Can you see that first of all? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, thanks for inviting me, Paul. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about what we're doing in Devon and Cornwall. First of all, just picking up on your comments, Paul, in your introduction around the identification of heritage crime being really important in terms of the ongoing the CPS engagement and then the court appearance. That was really brought into stark focus when, I mean, I've talked about it a couple of times now, but the theft of I think it was 13 bronze plaques off a war memorial in Devon, and we managed to persuade CPS using heritage crime advisors very early in the process, and Mark Harrison as well, with a superb victim personal statement or an impact statement. The charge of dealing in cultural heritage artifacts or cultural artifacts swayed the judge massively in terms of sentencing, and they got a sentence that vastly outweighed one that would normally be given around straight theft. So in doing that, I'm adding weight to your plea and your argument about identifying heritage crime at the earliest possible opportunity.
Thank you.
So Devon Cornwall Police, what are we doing in heritage crime areas? So we are deeply involved with the national group, and I work with Mark, Paul, and others in that area. So not being familiar with Zoom, I'm going to try now to work my way through these slides. There we go. So just give you a little bit of context about D&C in terms of heritage. Over 400,000 designated sites in England, obviously 35,000 in D&C, nearly 10% of the total for England. So we do have a significant part to play in the national picture. you can see we've got a large number of scheduled monuments, 17% of the total number in England, not including the sites and structures that known but not designated. And we've seen significant loss of those on Dartmoor, for instance, the stone, the granite structures. Dartmoor National Park did surveys over, I believe it's a 20-year period, that showed a close to a 50% decline in their existence, which is shocking. And of course, that we then have the protected wreck sites off the English coastline, 21 of those in D&C waters. So policing is a funny old game at the moment. We're pulled from pillar to post. Priorities. I think it was back in the 1950s that the word priority was pluralized. We tended to have a priority, but not that I was in the police in the 1950s. But at the moment, there seem to be priorities all over the place, and we're pulled around constantly under public and government scrutiny, which is only right, but it does act as a distraction away from what we deal with regularly. We have the point of talking about that and the priorities is that heritage crime, is it top of Bobby's priority list when he's out on patrol? No, it's not, if I'm honest, and that's why we need to raise the awareness internally and externally, and we need our heritage crime liaison officers that we've trained over, or Mark has trained over 25 of now, are so vital to protecting our heritage and cultural assets across the two counties and the Isles of Scilly. So when I talk to my exec members and the PCC, we very often use this slide, which is their own message that they put out to staff, both internally and a public-facing message, which is unsurprisingly uses heritage at its core, because that's what Devon and Cornwall is famous for, the beauty of the two counties. And there we have Smeaton's Tower in Plymouth, Dartmouth Castle, first artillery fort, I think, built in the country, and a statue down there in Tintagel. All heritage crime, then that's what it looks like on our patch for a 2-year period. We're able to heat map that, and I'll talk about how we're doing that shortly. Mostly coastal and urban, very often churches and National Trust properties targeted, but not solely. What you will notice there is the lack of heritage crime reported in our national parks. So Dartmoor and Exmoor, where we know there are a lot of heritage-related crimes and activity, we don't have the reporting. Scarcity, obviously, the reason for that. You know, we don't have people around there to report it. Very often, the national parks haven't reported loss of assets, but they're crimes, and we need to know about it. So sparsely populated, but not bereft of heritage-related crime by any means. I know I'm talking to the converted here. This isn't the usual audience for this presentation. So there you are. That's the heritage type of assets that we have in Devon and Cornwall. We have a World Heritage Site with Cornwall and West Devon, the tin and lead mining and silver mining that went on there, and we still have those wonderful engine towers across that landscape. And we have the whole gamut of heritage sites, including battlefields, monuments, wrecks, etc., that we've already discussed. So the World Heritage Area, 20,000 acres, or hectares, sorry, 18th and 19th century, the main period of innovation, legacy deep mines, and we have they come with their challenges. We have a missing person in one of them currently as well. Engine houses, ports and harbours, and 2/3 of the world's copper was supplied from Devon and Cornwall's mines at one point, which is a staggering statistic. Huge volumes of the population were involved in that. The main threats then that we experience, similar to the rest of the country, arson. We had an inscribed standing stone there, Menscriffa Madron, which was subject to arson, product put onto it, and it burnt to create a torch. We'll never fully recover that stone, we don't think, into the condition it was in prior to that. It's a prehistoric stone, clearly, although it has got an inscription on it. The stone itself and the erection may well be earlier than the inscription. So, you know, terrible problem. We have other very notable arson issues. We had Stately Home went up a few months ago. Again, early identification by a heritage crime officer led to excellent results, and 2 offenders being found for that. Night hawking, you're aware of. This is an Iron Age hill fort around Penzance. Essentially stripped the site clean. Witnessed, it was during the day. No one called us until it was too late, until we discovered the piles of metal afterwards. And this is part of the problem, actually, isn't it? That people, you know, the general public don't necessarily understand what heritage crime is, let alone our own staff internally. So the education piece is absolutely vital. And they're the discarded metal that was of no use to them, presumably the ferrous stuff discarded at the scene. So what are we doing in Devon and Cornwall? Working very closely with Mark, Paul and colleagues in Historic England, we're looking at a number of marking issues, marking opportunities. So we've started a system of signing scheduled monuments as protected places, warning the population, the public who want to visit them and enjoy them, not to dig, trespass, light fires, etc. Don't drive on them. Where you know, it might seem like a strange thing to advise people not to do, but we get people driving all over Dartmoor all the time in their lovely Chelsea tractors that appear in our area of the world over the summer period, and many get stuck, and we try not to laugh, but then we get them off. Hopefully they haven't been over a heritage asset. Protecting wreck marking, I'll come on to more of later, and what we're doing to support that protected wreck marking system. So the signage actually has proved really popular. It's so simple, it's really easy to do. It's had some great feedback, not only from Historic England, English Heritage, but also from the visiting public who are pleased to see us in partnership protecting our nation's heritage. So a simple thing to do, but one that's been really popular. So one of the first things, so I am the strategic lead for heritage and cultural asset crime in Devon and Cornwall. And when I took up the role probably 2.5 years ago now, one of the first things I wanted to do was set up a partnership across the peninsula. Sounds very basic, sounds very easy, but it is using technology. So it's using teams in order to do this. There's never been an ability to link up as we have now. Teams I'm not a Microsoft salesperson, by the way. I'm just identifying it as an excellent method of communication. We've got 52 members on that partnership, meets 4 times a year, from archaeological trusts, archaeological units, Royal Navy, national parks, the RSPB, RSPCA, who are also land interested people, a huge variety of people, and volunteer historic societies, all of whom come together using teams to share information, send alerts. It gives us the opportunity to identify themes, issues that they're experiencing. The last one, the time, but before one, we had a really unusual theme come up around planning, one that we were totally unaware of, that we had to record some crimes of, which is the disappearance of red telephone boxes, which are listed without consent. Where do they go? We don't know. Who's removing them? We've got an idea. I'm not going to mention it here, but it's an example of where unusual heritage and cultural issues are raised to us. It gives an excellent opportunity for us to seek expert advice and spread good practice. So physically, we meet every 4 months. I try and do it in person. We've used Buckland Abbey, Bodmin Keep, and a number of other heritage locations for us to meet and exchange these ideas. But it is a superb partnership, really, really popular with those who attend. We get excellent engagement with this. I've got chief officer engagement with it. So my deputy chief constable is personally interested in this and has attended 2 of the meetings. So for me, it's a win-win. It's a win with the heritage population. It's a win internally with policing as well. I'll give you an example of one of the posts there. So this is Bury Pomeroy Castle, where we had some incidents of night hawking. I was interviewed on ITV for this. We got a fair bit of publicity around it. We were able to share the images across the whole of the heritage network in the southwest very quickly, and get the message out and encourage colleagues and asset owners to target harden their properties, because we knew this gang were in the area. So that's one way of doing it very, very efficiently. So that's one use of Teams. We're able to spread legislation that way, changes in legislation, advice. People have come to us on that around hedge laying, hedge destruction, as in ancient hedge destruction, and a number of other heritage issues. It is a fascinating site. So Storm is our command and control system. Just pretend you can't see all the letters and numbers on that because they're police vehicles moving around. This is not a live shot. This is the previous one. But what we have done with the Storm system is I've been able to overlay scheduling and a number of other listings, schedulings, national parks, gardens, and importantly recs onto our system. So you can see the icons here of a sailing boat. They show where a wreck is sighted. If I go into that on the live system, it tells me what the wreck's called, the what 3 words, what its listing or scheduling is, what its protection level is. It gives me eastings and northings, and I'll come on to more that we're doing about that shortly. So I want to talk now a little bit more about that and the recs. So you can see there's our rec sites that we look after. So we've created site security protocols that are linked to Storm. So when you pick up that location, you get the site security protocols on there, what to do, who the license holders are, who to get hold of if they see activity that is unusual. It links to the map and the drone team. So Devon Cornwall has a bespoke drone team of a number of officers, trained pilots. We've identified launch sites for every protected wreck site. That's the closest point. We've approached the landowners so that we don't have to ask them when we get an incident. The drone just has to go to a location, launch off a known what 3 words, it's straight then out over the wreck, monitoring what's going on, which is a significant piece of innovation using our technology. Obviously, a lot of that is down to work with Historic England, MSDS, particularly around the marking. I'm not going to dwell on that because it's not us that's leading on that, but I believe we've got one site that's marked in our waters, and we're looking to support that as an organisation as much as we can. So this goes on to talk, this shows you storm in a bit more detail. So this storm it goes down through different layers of Ordnance Survey. You can see here the scheduling that's been overlaid onto that. So we've got, can you see my icon moving? My cursor moving on the screen? No.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, you can, okay. So we've got settlements on notes, we've got hill fort type settlements here, just off the A39. We've got another one there, which is some lynchets. And the Battle of Stratton, 1643, Civil War battle site. So we know any incidents that occur inside that are on a protected site. As I said, it does give us the location well. It flags up as soon as you go to an incident. What we can do with this, and what the next step, if you like, the next iteration of this, is to put a geofence of 20 meters, which we're planning to do shortly, around those sites. And that geofence will create an automated report every 3 months showing incidents and crimes linked to that geographic area. And that is something that is our next level of innovation. We've got a meeting about that next week to see when that can be turned on. Obviously, I've got to be slightly careful because a lot of these are urban. If I ask for all the crimes around Exeter Cathedral, I'm going to get an awful lot of drunkenness. I'm going to get a lot of public urination, a lot of disturbing the peace that I perhaps don't want to see on the list. So the filtering is going to be key to that, but it's a start. So this next slide just shows you around Lundy Island and the mass of scheduling on that, along with 2 protected wrecks there, and a 3rd protected wrecks, which I think is the Australian, which is out in the Bristol Channel there. So you get the picture. We've overlaid a number of battlefields, heritage parks and gardens, wrecks, scheduled monuments, World Heritage Sites onto our mapping system, and it is proving worth its weight in gold. Drone surveying then is the next thing that we're going to be doing around. So we want to trial this. So as I said, we've got a drone team. The drone team was really enhanced in its capabilities through the policing of the G7. And we've managed to get a lot more capability into the drone team, not only staff, but aircraft and capability. Working with DSTL, the Ministry of Defence team that undertake their surveying, we're looking at surveying 6 sites with the permission of the asset owner, predominantly Historic England, English Heritage, and 1 private owner. And the idea is that we create from that aerial survey a 3D model of the site. This is incredibly accurate. I saw it demonstrated on G7 with a number of the buildings that we were looking to protect there. It is unbelievable to the middle-aged person. What you can do with that technology is, in virtual reality terms, create a 3D model on a table and undertake exercises or activity based on that 3D model with your VR goggles. It's bizarre, but it's a real step forward. So I'm going to work with our command training, our firearms training teams who've got an interest in this, and linked to previous presentations that we've had on the Heritage Crime Partnership from Protect UK, the CT network, who look to protect and give advice to asset owners who have the public in them very often. We're going to work with them to create these models. So not only to use them for firearms and public order and CT counterterrorism training, but to offer us as a heritage crime team the ability to have a moment in time of that model. So if I use Oakhampton Castle as an example, we've had repeated reports of ASB graffiti and theft of the stone from Oakhampton Castle, which is a medieval castle that's so it's basically degrading walls. So there's no enclosed area. It is a number of walls, significant walls. So we can capture a moment in time and look at what the degradation is over a 3-month period. We can then hopefully use that for the asset owner can use that. There's this is a trial, so there's a conversation about how we do that in the future, whether it's a contracted service, but to trial it, that's what we intend to do. So we get a moment in time of these standing monuments. At the moment, we're looking at Oakhampton Castle, potentially St Michael's Mount, Tintagel Castle, Bodmin Moor, Craddock Moor, Giant's Cairn, Bury Pomeroy Castle, and potentially Exeter Cathedral to look at the, and that one particularly will be of interest to our firearms training teams around iconic enclosed spaces and the towers particularly. So we can use it to engage the public for crime prevention, augmented 3D. You can show the landowner the site and say, well, this is where we think your vulnerabilities are, and go through crime prevention, target hardening activity with the asset owners as well. So that's the next step. That's our intention. We've got really good buy-in from DSTL. The asset owners, with the exception, I think, of St Michael's Mount, are really, really keen on this. Not that they're not. I just don't think we've engaged with them at any meaningful level. That's the next step. It's where we want to go. It's significant innovation, and I think it will prove its worth significantly around the protection of those assets and the availability of that data for not only responding officers, but also those planning activity, crime prevention, and protection of the asset. Did I want to talk about anything else? Paul, I think that's probably it, to be honest. I've gone through our current, what we're linking to CT work, training, capture the status quo. I think that's probably it. That's where we are at the moment.
Thank you very much, Tom. That's really, really exciting, especially the drone bit. And I know I've got a couple of questions before anybody else might. Obviously, for everybody else's benefit, this is Devon and Cornwall are a really interesting area for the reasons that Tom gave in terms of the number of assets that they have, the amount of coastline, and so some of these innovations, the marine team in Devon and Cornwall, along with the heritage crime officers, excuse me, have been working with the licensees and MSDS to create sort of protection. And we've had police divers working alongside licensees teams, which is fantastic. Having the drone capability to deploy in a pre-arranged way when we hear about suspicious activity, again, is a game changer. Particularly though, Tom, my question is around the drones and the building 3D models, which is really exciting. And you mentioned there the ability to monitor sites over time, which obviously from a heritage crime point of view is really important, provides an evidence base and helps with hardening defences and so on. But there's obviously a wider application for the historic environments and natural environments as well, in terms of monitoring these places, potentially for storm damage and other activities. So over time, so I think there's some really interesting questions for us about how might we utilize the kind of capabilities that you have that we would never be able to afford in the kind of partnerships that you're talking about going forward. So some really exciting questions. I don't have any answers at the moment, but I've got a lot of exciting ideas about how I think we might be able to use that kind of capability for much wider historic environment applications, not just around heritage crime prevention. So, and that kind of partnership, again, working with police forces thinking a bigger picture outside of just the immediate policing and crime activity where there's public benefit to those partnerships, I think is a really exciting new way of looking at things.
Yeah, it's difficult. You don't want to get, I don't want to get too excited about this, but because I'm retiring shortly, but also because there's, you know, the possibilities are endless. Frankly, it's so exciting that I've got to rein myself in a little bit when we're talking about it, when we're looking at what, you know, the what next, because the potential benefits to the heritage world are extreme, and there's a limit to what I can promise from our drone team, because they're publicly owned asset and primarily for policing purposes, which is why tying in the counter-terrorism and the public order and the training side of our house as well is so key, because if we can use those locations as virtual training zones as well, the benefits are huge. You know, in terms of crime monitoring things, it is incredibly difficult to. So I mentioned the cairn on Bodmin Moor, Giant's Cairn. That has essentially been dismantled stone by stone and moved by members of the public who haven't got a clue what they're doing in the nicest way. They don't know the damage they're doing. That sort of time stamping of field archaeology as well, of landscape archaeology, will be just invaluable. The benefits will be seen in the second, the third, the fourth scans about what, you know, the changes in the landscape. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's really exciting. We need to develop it to a point where we are able to offer it, and that's the bit that I don't understand at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, and yeah, really look forward to seeing how that works out. I think there's really exciting potential there. Does anybody? We have a few moments, so does anybody have any questions or any observations around any of that? Just trying to see if I can see into the chat. Can't see anything. Hang on.
We've got a question in from Sandy. The drone team, I guess, is pulled in different directions and doesn't have a lot of resources. Is there scope for using public engagement?
Tom, do you want to sort of obviously the capabilities and resourcing of the drone teams one you're aware of?
Yes, so absolutely. So they get drawn in all sorts of directions, from missing people to firearms operations, and so they're only on duty for. I mean, they are a limited asset. We do actually have quite a large drone team. We don't use the helicopter quite as much as we used to, because it's quite an expensive oil burner. The drone team are becoming more commonly used, so there is a significant investment. We're also developing now a capability to widen our drone assets and carry them in more patrol vehicles. So because it is such a useful piece of kit for searching wide areas. So I think it is a capability that will only increase in size and technological ability. I'm sorry, I missed the second part of the question. My apologies.
Is the scope for using public engagement?
Yeah, as in volunteer drone users, presumably. So absolutely,
yes.
I think, you know, yeah.
Yes, that's what I meant, is that
Yeah.
obviously the drone teams are called, you know, people are using their drones to track animals and do all sorts of things. I just wondered if it was some way of also using it for good.
Well, we have heritage policing volunteers that work in all sorts of different areas. I've got a volunteer who's just set up a heritage watch for Oakhampton Castle. So, you know, actually, what we use policing volunteers for, which is what you would have to do if you put them in a policing context, you know, it's endless. Actually, there is no end to what you can use a policing volunteer for. So yeah, I think so, Sandy. I think it's a good suggestion. It's one that we can certainly look at. That let's get this off the ground first, and then we can see where it goes, what the demand's like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one interesting element to this, and I think, as Sandy mentioned, there are lots of people and there is various software that people can use for 3D modeling and drones, and I think there are lots of ways in terms of heritage that we can look at projects to develop more knowledge and, you know, much more widely for the heritage benefit beyond just heritage crime. I think one of the exciting things about the capability that you've got, as you mentioned, is that it was obtained, or lots of it was obtained for the G7, and so the quality of the material that can be produced is of an order that would be prohibitively expensive to most civilian uses, and that's where one of the benefits of utilizing what you can produce with your kit is a benefit to heritage, and something that, again, partnership will probably make it accessible to Historic England, for example, and to other owners, where it wouldn't be accessible if we had to fund it commercially from scratch. So I think there's an element of that there as well about, and you can layer those various things as you would with any other tools, but it's how we make sure that we get that fit right, so that we can bring it all together and just, you know, get as much data as possible and then present it in the right way.
And you're right, Paul, and the partnership angle to this is absolutely key, and which, you know, it just comes back to the raising awareness of heritage crime, the heritage crime issue, the national group. All of this links in to make this more a more accessible piece of technology to assist.
Yeah. No, I think that's excellent. Yeah, there's a little bit of chat going on with Mark and Sandy around how some of that might happen in the chat. So that's excellent. We're just coming up to 10 o'clock. So thank you very much, Tom. That's been really interesting and really thought-provoking, and a really good start to the session. And I would encourage people through CIFA groups, you know, if you have thoughts, do get in touch with us. We can, if you happen to be in the Devon Cornwall area, we can put you in touch with Tom and his colleagues. If you have thoughts about ways that, you know, you might be able to develop things, or links that you have, or questions about how you become a police support volunteer, again, we can put you in touch with the right people in your local force. So do get in touch with us and let us know. So thanks very much for that, Tom. I know you're very busy, but if you're available to hang around and later on for the discussion, then you're very welcome. But if you can't stay with us, you know, again, I would just like to thank you very much for providing the time this morning to come and update us on that.
Thanks very much, but I'm afraid I do have to leave. I've got the safeguarding adult ball.
Thanks. Okay, Mark Harrison, are you ready to share screen for your team, and then I'll just do the introduction? Excellent. Okay.
There was a question from, I think it was Anastasia, but she put her hand back down again.
Oh, right. Okay. Did you want to ask a question? No,
Theodora,
nothing.
is that you? Was it you who'd put your hand up? If you're trying to talk, we're not quite hearing you. Maybe you can put your question in the chat.
Yeah, not hearing that. So yeah, if the question can go into the chat, and we'll pick that up
Okay.
a bit later. So just, I'm sure to many of you, Mark Harrison will be well known, but in case he isn't, Mark is the head of heritage crime at Historic England. It was English Heritage when he first joined, and research fellow in the
That was the
Centre for
Ministry of
Heritage.
Works one you and I joined, wasn't it?
Well, it feels like it sometimes, yeah. And yeah, also a research fellow in the Centre for Heritage at the University of Kent, former senior police officer who's also worked at the Home Office on antisocial behaviour and similar things. So Mark, is I've said this before at the conference, I think, but it's pretty much agreed that is the godfather of heritage crime practice in England and hence the United Kingdom, which has sort of followed in different ways. So very pleased to have you and your team here today, following on from that really interesting work that's being done down in Devon and Cornwall, but looking at an equally innovative and exciting area. So I'll let you introduce the rest of your team, Mark.
Thanks, Paul. Does that Godfather reference mean that I'm actually the top perpetrator then?
It has been alleged on occasion.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Mark Harrison speaking, and I'm joined today by, well, I'm going to introduce themselves, Paul.
Excellent.
So let's kick off with Sandy Dan.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Sandy Dan. I'm a professor of materials chemistry at Loughborough University. My background here is through pigments and their relation to graffiti.
Thanks, Paul Kelly.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully this you can hear me. I'm having severe problems with my headphones and microphone.
It's all good.
Yeah, cool. So I'm professor in inorganic chemistry here at Loughborough. My time working with Mark has probably been over the last decade or so now. After we kind of inadvertently got into the forensic side of things with a fingerprinting device that then became commercialized. But the original work, which we alluded to later with Mark, was on combating lead theft. And what that's meant is we've tried to expand our interest in that. And again, we can talk a bit about that later on.
Thanks, Paul. Amber?
Hi, my name is Amber. I'm a second year chemistry student at Loughborough University, and I joined this project through an internship over summer. So I've only been with it for 8 weeks, and I'm still kind of working on it slowly while I do my degree.
Thank you. And Bouquet? Oh, Bouquet's not joining us, is she? She's in class.
Hi, sorry, I'm
You're
here.
just here.
I'm just
You're here.
I'm just having for a while. I might have just disconnected and trying to get back in.
Okay, you're in now.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Bouquet. I'm currently a third year at Loughborough University. I've joined this project over Easter.
Oh dear. Lost her.
I can take over for Bouquet quickly if you'd like.
Go on then.
So yeah, Bouquet and me have been working together over summer. She came down for a week. We're both students, so we're kind of working on the more outreach and testing side.
Thank you. So as Tom and Paul have alluded to, Heritage Crime Programme is now, crikey, can't believe this, it'll be 14 years old next year. So it's been slow but steady process, and the Heritage Watch part of the programme, which is part of Neighbourhood Watch, which is embedded in all of our communities across the country, is where we are putting most of our effort. Paul was quite right where he said prevention is always our primary objective, but we've got to develop the capability and the capacity to investigate as well. The Heritage Watch programme is currently being reviewed by former Chief Constable Andy Bliss, who some of you will know, and of course Andy is also a buildings archaeologist, so he brings a unique insight. So that paper will be presented in its draft form next month. And as Tom has highlighted, the vast majority of protected sites and buildings across the United Kingdom are owned and managed by members of the public. Yes, Church of England, local authorities, some of the bigger heritage charities do look after and manage protected sites, but the vast majority are owned by members of the public. So maybe that's the focus for heritage as we move on. And one of the things that Paul and I actually started working on with Martin Newman's team a few years ago was how we took the API, how we took the data sets of where all the protected sites and buildings in England were located, and give police officers almost like a heritage professional in their pocket to actually say, you're getting very close to a protected site and building. Technology really has moved on since the pandemic. So the proximity application, which we've called Heritage Compass, which I thought was quite snazzy, we're now starting to have another look at that, because with the development in apps and interactive websites, we think we can make this into something very exciting. And it also gave us an insight into how we could use artificial intelligence. So working with my friend and colleague, Professor Robin Bryant at Canterbury Christ Church University, Robin is a mathematician. He's also experienced in policing and criminal justice. And with his geography team at Christ Church, we started to look at how we could use large text models of AI, large text models, to actually go through tens and tens of thousands of crime and incident reports that have been logged with Kent Police to see how many of them would have been identified as heritage crimes if they'd been correctly recorded at the time. So the map of Kent that you see on the right-hand side, to be honest with you, when we put that in and just asked the basic question, how many heritage crimes were recorded in this set period, it was almost blank. But when we set the AI running, it then came up with that map. So it was actually showing us that it was the way that people were reporting and the way that police were recording. Evidentially, that gave us the impetus to say to the National Police Chiefs Council, reporting and recording has got to be our #1 objective. In terms of forensic capability, forensic science has been around for a long time, but we haven't used soil analysis to actually prove heritage loss. So here we had offenders attacking the grounds at Beeston Castle in Cheshire, a well-known, well-recorded Bronze Age site, and they took away 3 socketed Bronze Age axes. Great work by a partnership team to bring these people to account, and a big part of the evidence was cleaning out the soil from the axes and then comparing it with the soil that we found at Beeston Castle. By itself, it wouldn't have been enough evidence to convict the gang, but as part of the overall evidential package, it was crucial. And we'd never used plant DNA before. So just after the pandemic, there was a big rush for people to steal stone from churchyards, high streets, all over the place. Stone is not regulated in the same way that scrap metal is. So there is no requirement for people buying and selling stone to keep records. They can make a cash transaction. So this relates to the theft of 97 coping stones from the perimeter wall at Tatton Park in Cheshire. We did feature on the BBC Expert Witness programme, where we had to refer to it as Heritage Park. Property is owned by the National Trust, and they asked for it to be anonymised. But here, Rosie Everett again, using her skills to match the plants growing on the recovered stones and matching them with the gaps in the wall. Again, by itself, it wasn't evidence that would have proven the case by itself, but was a key component in them pleading guilty and getting 2.5 years in jail. And of course, Paul and his team have been very much, well, the key component in our underwater marking project, which again is part of the Heritage Watch programme. Paul, are you going to talk about that later?
Not specifically today, no.
Okay. Did you just want to give a quick 2 secs on that?
Yep, certainly. So again, if you're interested in more detail, then there's a really good article by Heaven Mira and Alison James in the Archaeologist magazine, which, as I've said, is available via the group page. But effectively, water is an interesting challenge. We wanted to find some way of marking materials, be that bronze cannon, metal wreck hulls, or wooden timber wreck material, high profile underwater, in a way that could subsequently be discovered through transfer to clothing and equipment. But it had to be safe to be put into the marine environment. So obviously a very complex project. MSDS Marine carried out on behalf of Historic England, and our colleagues from the Cultural Heritage Agency in the Netherlands are also partners in the project. That's now been deployed on numbers of wrecks. We've been undertaking testing to make sure that it survives over a longer period on site, and that product is going to go to the next stage very soon, and we're hoping to roll it out. As was mentioned by Tom Holmes, it's been deployed on a wreck in the southwest and other wrecks around the country. We're deploying it on more wrecks. We're not saying which ones in all cases, because obviously there's a deterrent in not knowing whether or not it's present, but it's a real game changer for us. And that, as one element, alongside the kind of work that Tom and his team are doing with drones, means that something which was really, really difficult in the past, catching people stealing from historic wrecks, is becoming much, much easier and more achievable. It's still a challenge, but things have moved on massively in the last 5 years because of these two developments. And I think we're really going to see an increase in deterrence, but also in identifying and prosecuting culprits. And that's probably enough for today. But if people are interested, get in touch with us and we can talk to you about it.
Yeah, a really good development using sort of existing methodologies, but adapting it to a hostile and challenging environment. And of course, it comes into the whole pantheon of how we've dealt with underwater criminality, which was, there was huge anxiety about my role, wasn't there, Paul? The fact that I'd been brought in, that the rumour was I'd been brought in to actually do away with underwater leisure diving, which was crazy. And I think when we made those early arrests and we had those early convictions, that's where the diving community really came together. And that shows what the community can really do in preventing crime. And where we do get crimes, the intelligence flows are very, very solid. Thank you. So in my role in the Centre for Heritage at the University of Kent, the Dean likes the fellows to have projects. So for me, this was a great opportunity to look at all the schools and faculties across the university to see if we could provide ideas and concepts for students and academics to develop new and innovative techniques and tactics to help us prevent crime and investigate crime in the natural and the historic environment. So we call that Hawkeye, the Heritage and Wildlife Crime Innovation, STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering and Management. We've been going now just before the pandemic. We've had some really good undergraduate, postgraduate work done. And one of those was, again, taking the concept of the computers that we all now have in our pockets, smart devices. 93% of the adult population in England has a smart device. The computing power is incredible. So we asked our MSc engineering students to see if they could take the camera function on a smartphone, didn't matter if it was Android or Apple, and see if we could use artificial intelligence deep learning models to identify the difference between modern lead and historic lead. So this would be useful for police officers on patrol, stopping vehicles on the road networks, or when they're searching scrap and recycling centres. Now, we only had 6 weeks. We had to build the image gallery. We only had 100. What we needed was about 10,000. But anyway, we worked with 100, and the team got it up to 92% accuracy, telling the difference between modern lead and something that we regarded as historic lead. So this gave us the idea that we could use AI and that architecture to look at graffiti. Now, the imaging and tracking of graffiti using photography is nothing new. As a junior cop, I would quite often take a Polaroid. Do you remember those Polaroid pictures? And take them around local schools to see if staff and kids at the school recognize the tags. But this is an extension to that. Again, using smartphone technology, could we actually geolocate the graffiti and get the AI looking at the iconography, looking at the shapes and the colors, the places that it had been presented? And have we got Martin Newman on the call?
We have. I'm here, Mark.
Thanks, Martin. You know this building well, don't you?
Yes, that's in the Lawns in Swindon.
Yeah, and it does seem to be, it's a scheduled monument. It does seem to be that it presents itself as a natural canvas, doesn't it?
It's also a listed building.
Yeah. And the question I'd really like to ask those graffiti artists, are you attacking this building because it's protected and it's old, or are you attacking it because it's a good place to put your mark? My guess is it's probably the latter. But the team of volunteers, I think it's volunteers here, isn't it, Martin?
Sorry, I said yeah. I said yes. There are
Yeah.
volunteers, but it's actually it's owned by the council as well.
That's right. And you can imagine a team of volunteers, they cut the grass, they clean the place, they come in, and there's been another attack. It really does sap their morale. So this inspired us to sort of bring together a team under the badge of Spectra, which was the original name for the metal identification project. Spectra sort of implies that we're using light in our work. So bringing together HE, Loughborough, in particular, the Department for Chemistry, obviously Robin Bryant at Christchurch, our colleagues in the police service. And interestingly, graffiti is classified by government as litter. So it's actually coordinated by DEFRA, but of course the Home Office does have a big role in this. So what did we want to set as our objectives? Could we nail down where these attacks occur, obviously through the heritage list for England. We know the location of those protected sites down to the square inch. We know their designation. We had to come up with a typology, and fortunately for us, one of my students at Christchurch, Kyle, did some work in the World Heritage area at Canterbury, where he came up with 3 types of graffiti. Number 1 was a territorial tag. So as you can, that will be like your signature. Then a juvenile scribbling, which is just, it doesn't mean anything. It's just some paint or a pen. And then the larger pieces are known as piecework. So the image behind me, you've got Ashley Tether, who was the Heritage Crime Officer for Cheshire. He's now moved to the National Rural Crime Unit. He's looking at one of 5 pieces of work that were put onto the historic Roman walls at Chester. In fact, it's just outside of the scheduling because it's the geological part. But you can imagine that aerosol paint going into the sandstone, almost impossible to clean. So we've used those 3 for the methodology. And then what hadn't been done before was, could we attach the imaging data to the chemical formulation of the paints? Could we then match that to known manufacturers? And I think more importantly, could we start to uncover the illicit market? So the formulations and manufacturers that we don't know. And could we link it to retail crime or illicit trade and importation? And then a little bit further down the line, could we start thinking about new techniques and methods for cleaning, new advice and guidance, and how are we going to really crowdsource the data that we need to make the AI really useful? Because the more data we can give the deep learning model, the more questions we can ask. And at that point, I will now hand over to Loughborough.
So, oh my God. Sorry, I'm a little bit ill at the moment, just to preface. So, yeah. So we started our connection with historic England through a crime, and Mark Harrison, through dealing with lead and copper and their theft. And we kind of wanted to come up with a new method to detect it with him that isn't invasive. So we're not harassing anyone, or we're not destroying the evidence or any of that kind of stuff. So the idea was to come up with a gel, which when applied to the hand would show when lead and copper had been there, which eventually led to it actually being shown on Crime Watch, which was really good for science, because personally, I think publicizing science is really, really important, because science is the forefront of the world and it should be shown to everyone. So this was really, really important to demonstrate this new idea of copper and lead theft, and was also the beginning of our relationship with Mark Harrison. So yeah, if Paul Kelly would like to speak a little bit more on that, because he was actually directly involved with this project. No?
Yeah, sorry, Amber. I'm still working my way around Zoom because we do everything on Teams. So, yeah, the point of that was exactly as Amber said. Really, it was the start of a process where we had the notion of taking commercially available, perfectly well-known forensic gel lifters, which are used to record things like footmarks at scenes of crimes and so on, and say, well, actually, if you apply those to a surface, whatever that surface is, what can you then do to reveal stuff that isn't immediately obvious? So in this case, it was the trace and the pattern of that trace of metal. So if you pick a cuprous-based object up, for example, if you then have a gel lift off the hand, which is what was going on here with the presenter, and then do a very simple chemical treatment to it, you can reveal where in this case the copper was on the person's hand, and then the bigger machine you see there, the LIBS machine, can then tie that copper sample into the original artifact. And that whole notion of post-treating gels has still got a lot of life in it. We looked at it in the context of stone theft to say, if you took a lift from a stone, does that elemental analysis that you could do on it, does that then give you information about where that stone had been for the last sort of 20 odd years? And we had some success with that. You could, in certain circumstances, convince yourself that his stone had been in a sort of city centre environment for that time, as opposed to a rural one. It's not clear that that technique is ultimately dependable enough, but it did show what could be done. And as we say, this was our first real interaction with Mark and Historic England. There you go. Carry on, Amber.
Yeah, so can I click to the next slide or?
That's me, I think.
Oh, perfect.
Ooh. There you go.
Yep, Buka.
Perfect. Hi, hope you can all hear me. Sorry about disconnecting at the start. Thank you, Amber, for picking up from that. So we had quite a couple of public engagement activities where we went to Canterbury Cathedral and Hardwick Hall. I went to Canterbury Cathedral with Mark Harrison, and from his large network, we managed to get into contact with the head stonemason of Canterbury Cathedral, who was Heather. She showed us the cathedral grounds and extensively shown us all the stones which were currently in use at the cathedral and the ones which are getting replaced due to weathering. And the stones that they were using were similar stones in terms of composition and the type of stone, but they had better qualities which allowed for longer use of them and were a bit more resistant to weathering. We had this amazing opportunity to visit the stone yard of where all of the stones that are currently being made for the restoration of the cathedral, and we went in and had a great chat with them, and they allowed us to take some samples back to Loughborough for any analysis that we were doing. We got 3 different types of limestone that they were using: Carnstone, Bathstone, and Lavo 8 grain, and they just gave us a 30 by 30 square of the stone, and we used them in our further analysis that we did in Loughborough.
Yeah, so outside of Canterbury Cathedral, we went to Hardwick Hall, which is closer to Loughborough University. So it was me, Professor Paul Kelly and Professor Sandy Dunn, who all went together to go and talk to the stonemasons there, because we were really lucky to get in contact with someone called Richard Wilkes, who is the head stonemason at Hardwick Hall, and he was incredibly passionate about telling us all about the stones there. It was a really, really interesting trip to hear from someone who knows everything about stone, about our research, if that makes sense. We were really lucky to see the whole process of how they cut the stones, how the stones are transported, how they're cut, and actually if you look at the photos, you can see the horse, and that had just been created. It was really interesting to see how this massive lump of stone was slowly made into this small horse's head. So on this trip, we were planning on getting some samples, but because Hardwick Hall, the stones that they have are really, really big, we'd have to get them like cut properly. So in the end, we decided in December, we'll probably get some stones delivered to us, which would actually work better because we'll have more uniform samples than having just small cuts of stones like we had from Canterbury Cathedral. But once we get these samples, we can keep further testing on them.
Oh, perfect. So To analyze our samples, we used a method called powder X-ray diffraction, and we decided on using this just because the machine can actually easily identify a chemical compound within the sample that we've had with a really small amount. And as you can see in the middle photo, those pieces of stones, they're about 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter squares, and that was even quite large for the machine. We still had to file them down and cut them to get them flat across the surface for it to work much better. So the diffractometer basically distinguishes between the compounds that is in the sample, and because it needs a very tiny amount and we're using it for paint samples, it would be very easy to use this machine to do it. And because a very small sample is required, in real life work that we would have to do for this, like for graffitiing, you might not be able to get very large samples from that. So it's a quite ideal machinery to use. For the samples that we did initially, we only used household paints, so very generic ones. And as you can see, they are mainly shades of blue and green, apart from a spray paint that we had, which was a black spray paint. The findings that we had from this, even though they were not fully conclusive, majority of the paints actually contained cobalt, which is a transition metal with a blue color, which corresponds to what we would have expected. As they are shades of blue and green, it would have made sense to have a chemical or a transition metal that has a blue pigment in it. And this would be very good to use in the future, just to start using for very small samples from actual sites, and seeing how small of a sample that we would actually need to be able to identify the chemical composition of the paint that was used at that site.
And just to quickly add on, it's important to have a small sample size at the start so we could see if this method actually worked. So once we know, because now we know that this is a good method to use, we can use it when we have actual real life samples. So that was the point of our research, was to kind of see if this was a worthwhile method to use. Next slide.
Next slide, yes.
Please. Thank you. Okay, so most of my kind of work over the summer was mostly focused on outreach, because I wanted to understand what kind of removal methods were being used in the world right now and in England. So Mark Harrison very, very kindly gave me a lot of contacts to talk to, and I talked to Sevenoaks and tendering councils. It was an amazing opportunity because as an undergraduate, you don't really get to talk to these people who have real influence over the way that England is handled, and it was a really interesting opportunity to have. So from this kind of outreach, I asked them questions like, what is your current removal methods? Do you have like a manual that you follow? And does your removal method change from a park bench to a heritage site? And the kind of conclusion that we came to was they do have different methods. However, they don't have a set manual that they follow. Luckily, so when I was talking to them, I was asking them if they use a company or if they have specific products that they use. And one of the companies that they were talking about was Restorative Techniques. So I heard about this company, sorry. I heard about this company from both Sevenoaks Council and from Canterbury Cathedral, which shows that it's quite a reputable company that's being used by multiple sources. And I was really lucky to be able to talk to them. The CEO is Jamie Fairchild, and he actually has wrote a paper for Historic England about graffiti removal. So he is an extremely knowledgeable man and was very willing to share what he knew. And we talked to him for about an hour and a half, and he told us all about what he's doing, what his future is, the kind of projects that he's made and their uses, and was an amazing help to see what we can kind of research in the future, because he brought up the interesting idea of, is there any point to the research if we kind of already have a solution? So yeah, he was a really great person to talk to in terms of talking to someone who's already in this kind of graffiti removal area. So the point of also getting the methods is we can test them on the stone samples that we have, and we can try the removal methods that are currently being used, the projects that are currently being used, and see which one is harmful, which one is the best, which one causes the most damage, and that kind of idea. So it's important to reach out to people who are actively doing it and not just think about it from a chemical kind of mindset, because naturally the idea is to jet wash what they're doing, instead of coming with a method of what is better for the stone. So yeah.
Okay. So another slide.
Yeah, just final thoughts.
Okay. So is it all of us or just you?
We can start. So
Go ahead.
I just wanted to start by saying thank you to Mark Harrison, Historic England, and everyone who was so willing to share and open and fund me and Bouquet with this project, because we were very lucky to be able to enter a world of academia and research for such a short amount of time and really learn what it's like. So Bouquet.
Yeah, it was an absolutely amazing opportunity, and we are very grateful that we managed to start the project. Sorry, I thought I got disconnected there.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
outside of like those two, we'd like to thank everyone, like the councils, so willing to share, and it really shows that people are actually interested in this, and as well as young people being interested in it, because historically the kind of people who would go to National Trust sites and that kind of stuff are people who are older and have more time to dedicate to that kind of stuff. But me and Bouquet have become so involved in this, and I've been so passionate about it. It genuinely shows that there is a younger interest in this kind of research and area. So yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. So Paul and Sandy.
Want me to go? Shall I go first? So
Yes.
so there are two different things here. There was also, Amber didn't talk about it, but we're linking in to the Missing Pieces project, which is the idea of recording. Do you want to say something about that first, Mark, and then I can explain?
Yeah. Obviously we've got Martin on the call as well, as from our mapping team as well. So Martin, was it about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, we added an extra tab to the Heritage List for England?
Yes. At the time we launched it, it was called Enriching the List, and we've had a bit of a revamp and a rebrand of it since. And that's adding, it was envisaged initially as a crowdsourcing project, so as well as engagement. So anybody could add to our knowledge of the list entries by adding something that wasn't part of the statutory legal text. Particularly add photographs, but also, do you know something else about the site that's not mentioned there? And we've got an amazing contribution, mainly photographs, some old photographs as well as current, and also additional information, references to books, so you can read more about it here, for example, and also people's personal reminiscences, particularly of, say, how they remember a site when they were young and growing up in the area and what's changed. And I love that aspect. Anybody can sign up to be a volunteer. Content is moderated, so that's the plug bit. But it's actually been very useful for not just heritage crime, but anything involved in sort of monitoring of condition of sites, because the descriptions are a point in time, they don't get updated very often for listed buildings, scheduled monuments, etc.
That's right, and that's really important. I think Tom made that point about sparsely populated areas. the ability for heritage professionals to visit some of these remote sites is very small. But people who live and work in the area, correctly briefed and informed and knowing what to do, it's a massive repository of intelligence. So when we had a look at the revamped project for missing pieces, we just wanted to know if the project team would be happy for us to work with our heritage crime officers, our growing number of police support volunteers, and as from November, heritage cadets. So these are going to be police and fire cadets that have an extensive training program in how to investigate heritage crimes. And they themselves could become the crowdsource for condition surveys, very basic condition surveys, and also for spectra. One of the things that, how long have we got, Paul? We okay?
Yes, you are. Yeah, we've got until 10:50, so we've got about another 9 minutes. Yeah.
So before I bring Paul in, I just wanted to show something that we've been working on with an amazing guy called David Fletcher.
So, could I come back to why we think this is useful for undergraduate crowdsourcing? So just remind you.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, Sandy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tom was talking about drones, putting drones up. So we've been using some drones with a guy called David Fletcher. So you can actually walk inside. So from a training perspective, you can actually build in all of your crime scenarios in here. And it takes him about, I don't know, 10,000 images, and then he uses software and stitches it all together. So we've put our first photogrammetric images onto missing pieces. Okay, Sandy.
So from our point of view, we thought that this missing pieces project might be a really good example of a citizen science project where we could encourage students to go out. So if we could get 16,000 undergraduates involved at Loughborough University, that would probably flood poor Martin, and he wouldn't know quite what to do with the images. But from a principle of getting different people from different backgrounds involved, it actually works quite well. So just to explain, so we're doing a pilot with some second years at the moment. So it's only the criminology groups and the chemistry students to try and encourage people to be involved in it. And our research teams are quite interested in this idea of linking through areas which could cover anybody's interest. So you might be interested because you like to go out walking, you might be because you're very keen on a particular building of faith, but it actually stretches out to lots of different communities, which, as somebody who's very interested in public engagement myself, it accesses communities that are often really hard to access. So it sort of solves two issues. And coming back from the idea of the paints angle, so I approached this from an area where I'd done a lot of work in the past on analysis of different sorts of pigment from different ways. So things with very similar chemical compositions behave very differently when you're trying to remove them. So for example, ultramarine blue, which is in washing powder, is used as that to give you that bluey whiteness. That behaves very differently to something like Egyptian blue when it's in a paint and how you get it off. So from my point of view, I thought that from being able to identify things in the field, so we can identify pigments in the field just by sticking a bit of sticky tape on it and pulling it off. So that's the kind of level we could do, and that would aid the cleaning off story by understanding what's in the paint first, so you know how to remove it better. So that's the kind of principles. I'm going to shut up now and hand over to Paul.
I suppose the other point just on that front to make is that it was apparent when we were talking to the cleaning companies that they had really great experience in doing that, but less so the actual practicalities, but much less work had been done on really exactly what happens to, for example, a stone surface when you do that cleaning. So what is producing ghosting effects and so on. So even if a technique works well, you've then got the question of, yes, but what is it actually doing at a very sort of microscopic, effectively, level to that stone surface? And that's something that I think has definitely got legs in terms of carrying on with. Just to build on what Sandy was saying, we talk about different communities. I think it's important to realize that you have scientific communities, academic communities out there who can contribute to this, but who don't really know. Well, they don't know two things. They don't know what the problems are that might be associated with heritage crime, and they don't know that they can contribute. We had a similar situation when we started working with in the very first forensic stuff we did that got us into this, working with Home Office labs and DSTL. And the same thing becomes apparent that, you know, there will now on our campus be people who can address issues that people like DSTL have, but they don't know what those issues are, and they don't know that they can contribute. So you really want that interaction between a heritage archaeological community and the academic communities, so you can bridge those kind of gaps that are there. I think that's really important. And what was interesting when we started the forensic stuff with labs like the Home Office, and we were working with absolute world-renowned experts, in that case on fingerprinting, but they were really welcoming in terms of getting us involved. There was no sort of standoffishness or thinking that we're the experts here and people are trying to muscle in or something like that. It was really gratifying to see that they were happy and really, really willing to get us involved. And the same has come from the internships that you just saw described by Amber and Bouquet. The response has been excellent from all sorts of practitioners. So that there's a real drive there, I think, or a real opportunity there to move things on. So it's almost sort of engagement stroke outreach from us to the heritage community, but it's the other way as well. You need to know what the problems are, because most people on campus, most academics probably won't even have heard of the phrase heritage crime.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. In closing, our next steps, obviously we've got to take account of the work we've done over the summer. One of the things I was particularly struck by talking to the team was that the major brands of aerosol paints that are sold and used in Britain, the formulations are well understood. But just from the early research, this illicit market of unregulated paint is something for us to be concerned about, because obviously unregulated formulations can bring forward all kinds of surprises. And Sandy, you used an expression called the chew factor, CHEW,
Yes.
in one of our conversations.
Yeah, it is, yeah. So this is the damage that is done to the stone underneath by using different sorts of cleaning agent. So depending on what you use to clean different materials off, you might be chewing the surface more than of the valuable asset more than you intended to. So this research about what damage is being done by the different cleaning techniques and comparing them preparing different paints and how they behave is part of that story about understanding how to damage the surface much less with the cleaning techniques.
And if our theory is correct that people are attacking sites because it's a good place to put your mark, then people like the railway providers, Network Rail, who own a huge amount of heritage on the rail system, are going to be very interested in this work. I understand that the railway providers are spending about £25 million a year trying to clean graffiti off trains. So this has started off as a heritage idea. I think it's going to expand. Sandy, I think we're going to be talking about this in Italy later this year.
We are indeed.
Which is good. And we've got a lot of work to do, but the crowdsourcing side of things, taking small samples from lots of sites across the country to build up a database, because once you have a large database, you can then start to ask the algorithm the really hard questions. You know, what is the most common color of paint used in graffiti attacks? Clusters, tracking, points of sale, etc. We think that the paint industry will come with us. Obviously, knocking out the illicit sales is going to be the key issue here, because you can buy it readily online now, but where's it coming from? So bringing in all kinds of new partners that we haven't worked with before, the health agencies, border force, customs, etc. So it all bodes very well, and we'll take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark, Sandy, Paul, and particularly Amber and Bouquet. And it's really good to see early careers people with such enthusiasm and skills. And I think for me, one of the things that's really exciting about this, putting heritage to one side for a moment, is the idea that this is an area that affects everybody, antisocial behaviour, graffiti, and so on in society, and the ability to bring science to people and demonstrate the real benefits of science in a real world application that everybody will be affected by it at some point in some way is really exciting, because that yeah, and that was demonstrated. And I think you know, that kind of passion that particularly you, Amber, and Bouquet sort of demonstrated is really positive. And that's what we need, is we need young scientists who can get out and engage with people and show them why science is important in everyday life. And heritage is just one aspect of, as you say, Mark, of where that those benefits can be seen. I'm mindful of the time, but we do have a few moments. Does anybody have any immediate questions? We do have a sort of discussion later on after the break, but does anybody have any questions or observations immediately in relation to that?
I could make a quick observation. Great meeting. And also one great thing that's come from it is that we now have a new nickname for Mark, the Godfather.
Absolutely. And that seems like a good place for us to go away and reflect for a few minutes. So on that note, if we can all be back at 11:10, and the next part of the session, we'll be looking at, okay, there's all this exciting stuff going on, but how do we actually start to map that? How do we develop skills and training? And how do we take that forward for the people that are engaged in this process? So lots to think about. So go away, stretch your legs, get a cup of tea or coffee, and get those thoughts in order for the discussion later on. Thank you for attending, and I hope I'll see you all again in a few minutes. Right. Well, I hope everyone's suitably rested and ready, because that was a really good session earlier on, giving us lots of new technology and its application and development to think about. So now this second half is really looking very much at the human aspect and how we develop people alongside that technology, and how we map both on the heritage side but on the law enforcement side some joint understanding of skills and how we can help people to build up those CVs. And again, particularly interesting, not necessarily for people at my end of the career journey, shall we say, but for early careers, how do we develop pathways, both from law enforcement and from heritage and science, to enable people to build up their and demonstrate their skills in heritage crime and the crossover areas, because it's the exciting thing is how many areas it crosses over into, and yeah, how do you map that when it's not a specific traditional role? So on that note, very pleased to hand over to Ash, who will give you something to think about there, and hopefully leading on to some really exciting discussion. So over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can all see me and you can see my screen.
Yep, that's all showing really clearly.
Excellent. I'm just going to move. There we go. Great. Okay. Sorry, my videos of people are obscuring my text, so I'm all right now. So, hi everyone. I hope you're enjoying the session so far. And as Paul said, we're now kind of having to think about skills and training. So there's a growing need for specific cross-sector skills for archaeologists, police officers, and other enforcement agencies. And one of the objectives of the Heritage Crime Special Interest Group is to work with CIFA to develop a special skills matrix, which would create a skills pathway, not just for archaeologists, but also for our law enforcement colleagues. And this demonstration of experience and skills is becoming increasingly important, particularly within a court environment. As you know, heritage crime is a complex subject, so how do we go about developing a skills matrix? In 2022, Historic England commissioned MSDS Heritage to carry out a project to determine the skills required to assist in dealing with heritage crime and to audit the current training provision. So I'm going to just present how the results of that project can help provide the basis for our future skills matrix. And at the end of my presentation, I'll host a short discussion because we would like to get your thoughts on a skills matrix and gain an understanding of the type of training that you'd like to see offered. So the project had 3 aims. So review the current training provision in heritage crime. So that involved identifying what training, so both CPD and further in higher education courses, are available for heritage crime, and develop a skills pathway. So based on that training review, the project aimed to develop a skills pathway based on HE's training model of prepare, enter, and sustain. And then that skills pathway identified gaps in training provision with recommendations on how those gaps could potentially be filled. And then the third aim of the project was to establish a special interest group, which we successfully achieved. So as part of developing that skills pathway, we identified 6 key subject areas which were deemed to be essential for those working to prevent heritage crime. And those subject areas are introduction to heritage and cultural property crime, legislation and strategic content, preventing heritage crime through risk assessment and intelligence, securing and preserving evidence, enforcement and prosecution, and community engagement and volunteering. And then those subject areas were categorized according to knowledge, skills, and behavior. So knowledge refers to the information required to perform a duty or duties, whether that's voluntary or within a professional role. The skills category is the practical abilities needed to apply the knowledge to successfully carry out a role. And then behavior is the mindset, attitude, or approaches needed for competence. And behaviors can be instinctive, but they can also be learned, and they're very transferable. So some of the subject areas cut across all of those categories. Those subject areas were then further broken down into topics with between 3 and 6 topics per subject. So you can see them there in the slide. And some of the subject areas contain topics that overlap with offences outside of heritage crime, and that particularly applies to the gathering and preserving of evidence, as methods of forensic investigation will be common to both heritage crime and other offences. And it should also be noted that law enforcement and management of heritage assets differ between terrestrial and marine environments. And to reflect this, the skills and competency matrix was split into these two environments. So while the subject areas and the topics remain common to both, the difference lies within the content of these topics, in addition to the potential audiences that might undertake some form of training within the area of heritage crime. As part of the matrix, we identified potential audiences for heritage crime training in both terrestrial and marine environments, and they're categorized according to the following groups. So national organizations and government agencies, heritage professionals, other professionals, including law enforcement, volunteers, community groups, and members of the public. And then once we identified those audiences, the level of knowledge required for each subject area and topic across those groups was determined. So 3 levels of knowledge were ascribed: not required, overview required, and in-depth knowledge required. So each audience group was mapped accordingly across all of the topics using a visual matrix, and that resulted in a total of 5 matrices for terrestrial and 5 for marine. And the slide shows an example of the matrix for heritage professionals within the terrestrial environment. And in order to show sort of the level of knowledge needed in a visual way, we created probably what looks like moonscapes or lunar cycles. So basically, if a circle's fully coloured in, that means in-depth knowledge is required for that subject area or topic. If it's a half circle, then you just need an overview. And then if the circle is blank, then you don't need in-depth knowledge for that particular topic. And then this matrix on the slide is an example for heritage professionals within a marine environment. So as well as creating a matrix and identifying audience groups, part of the project also included an audit of current CPD and further and higher education courses that link to heritage crime. And the results of the audit were mapped against the subject areas and the topics identified in the skills and competency matrix. And this mapping exercise was based on information available online, and therefore some assumptions had to be made. So 39 further and higher education courses were identified, and 7 of those couldn't be mapped against our matrix because of lack of information. And then of the remaining 1, these were found to meet the majority of the subject areas and topics, with most of them mapping against 3 or more subject areas. On the slide, you can see there are some topics which are highlighted in yellow, and they are the ones that could not be mapped to any of these further or higher education courses. And it could be that these topics are taught within the detail of some of the other course content, but that couldn't be determined. But on the face of it, it appears that these topics, aren't included in any training courses that we identified. So similar to that, we also mapped the CPD courses that we found. And again, that was based on information that was available online. And again, some assumptions have had to be made. So we identified 19 CPD events, and 3 of them couldn't be mapped due to lack of information. But in contrast to the talk courses, the CPD courses can only be mapped to 11 of the potential 25 topics within these 6 subject areas. And those which could not be mapped are shown in yellow. And it's possible, again, similarly to the talk courses, it's possible that elements of these could be included within detailed content of the courses, but we weren't able to determine that. So that was kind of the, that was a quick run through of the results of that project. And obviously at the start, I said one of the aims was to create a heritage crime special interest group. And I've put our 4 key aims of the group up there on the slide. And one of them is to help prevent heritage and cultural property crime through the signposting of resources, including training and guidance. And then linked to that is to explore with the CIFA Board of Directors the establishment of a register and panel of experts in heritage and cultural property crime. So in order to do that, we've kind of come up with a number of different areas that we would like to develop. And one of those is to build on the work that I've just outlined and work with CIFA to establish a recognised skills and competency matrix. And that will enable not just heritage professionals, but also law enforcement practitioners to gain formal recognition through membership of CIFA using this matrix. And the project also identified several recommendations to close skills gaps and where training could be facilitated. So we, as in the special interest group, will act as a hub for resources and will also develop guidance and a series of short training courses on a variety of topics that will be CIFA CPD approved. But in order to move forward with those, we want to try and get a viewpoint from people, comments and suggestions on the future skills matrix and what type of training that you'd like to see offered. So we've got about 10 minutes to have a discussion. So I'm just going to throw these questions out there. First of all, do you think the subject areas are sufficient? If you want me to put them back up on the screen so you can have a look at them, just let me know. But do you think they're sufficient to cover the various different aspects of heritage crime? Is there a particular area that you think we should develop more fully within a CIFA skills matrix? And when we're planning future events, is there a particular element of training that you'd be interested in? So I'm going to throw it open to the room, basically, and yeah, you can address all of those questions, just one of those questions. I'm going to open it up. Anybody?
Yeah,
I can't see our
thanks.
chat function, Paul. So,
yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. So thanks, Ash, and do raise your hands or unmute and ask questions as well. This is your chance, to have a say, and this is early doors where going to do more consultation, but this is a first opportunity to have a think about this. So there's no such thing as a silly comment or a silly question. It's all there for us to start thinking about. But from your perspective as members and others, what do you think it would be useful for you to know, and what skills do you think it would be useful for you to have, for you to make more of an impact, and to get more involved in prevention and, if necessary, investigation of heritage crime is really the question, I suppose, picked into those 3 key areas. So over to you. I can't see the screen at the moment. So.
Not seeing any hands or anything in the chat right now.
I'll go then.
Well done, Mark.
Okay. Mark.
Obviously, I did commission that piece of work. It was really important we did that. We were 10 years into the crime program. We'd had about, by that stage, we'd had about 12,000 law enforcement, heritage professionals, and community volunteers, activists, getting a range of inputs that you would describe as basic awareness, lasting, an hour, hour and a half, through to workshops, seminars, big conferences where you were front loading people with information. And then with the introduction of the video online function, it meant that we could do almost like one-to-one briefings, which was very, very important. So if we could bring up that slide, I think it's the one just before the one you're showing, Ash. The one more. No, it's the one. It's like a lots of circles on it. Keep going. There's another one with circles on it. It says
That one?
that's it. That's it. Yeah. So the research was really, really crucial to how we were going to develop the next 10 years. As Ash says, the courts are becoming increasingly hostile. The acceptance of expert evidence is becoming more and more challenged. So the ability for us to show the courts and the Crown Prosecution Service that we are taking training and awareness and qualification seriously is really important. So we have taken all of the recommendations and accepted those. And the bit that I've now been working on is the bit on the right-hand side, which talks about higher education. We didn't feel that there was a need at this stage to have a specific heritage and cultural property crime undergraduate degree. But what we felt would be achievable would be something at postgraduate level, maybe level 7, as a certificate. And I'm very pleased to say that we now do have a partner. We will be making a formal announcement later in the year, and that will be open to everybody, as long as you can show that you have got the requisite enthusiasm, I suppose I would say, to see the course through. But of course, at a certificate level, we could even then start thinking about, well, okay, can we add other certificates to that, which would then form a modularized master's program? So that's something for us to think about. But overall, really impressed. And of course, the CIFA idea of CPD is one that I thoroughly endorse.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark, I'm just wondering on that basis, is merit in thinking of short courses that look at some quite technical aspects, so it would allow people to actually gain a bit more appreciation of the basis of some technology that they might be employing at a practical level, but might need a little bit more of a feel for what its potential is, what its limitations is, and so on. Whether that was just a couple of days of getting a feel for actually being hands-on with a little bit more of the theory and practicality behind some techniques. That might be taking things too far, I don't know, but it would seem something that could be done.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Paul. In terms of the Hawkeye STEM, we now have 9 universities, soon to be 10 universities, in the STEM. And of course, that brings a whole range of knowledge and expertise. And you highlighted it yourself earlier on, which was people that didn't even know that they would be able to contribute. Really important. We've had approaches from colleagues in the wildlife crime sector, waste crime sector, to say, how have we actually managed to achieve this? And of course, I take all the credit myself rather than Ash and Alison, but no. What an amazing job you two did, because it set out a template that other parts of the crime pantheon can now look at and say, well, that's what we should be doing. So it was pointed out to me last week that if you did 3 certificates, short courses, and a dissertation, you could end up with a Master of Science, which I actually hadn't thought about. And these are very vocational. These are very much work-based, showing your tutors how you transfer that knowledge into understanding and operationalizing it.
Yeah.
I think there's some chat on around that as well in the box.
And I think Sandy has a hand up.
Sandy's got a hand up, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so really a really interesting piece of work. Thank you so much for that. That's given me quite a clear picture. So I can see that you could have like a partnership of universities to make it work, and field projects to fill that master's PGT. So as an ex-associate dean of education, I can see definite possibilities around those different areas to make that work.
Yeah.
Right. Stephen, Scott, Stephen, you got your hand up?
Yes, good morning. Stephen Armstrong-Smith. Just to let you know who I am. I retired 2 weeks ago, not long, from Essex Police as a designing out crime officer, and was the Heritage Crime Prevention Lead. One bit keen to put in there is looking at investigating a heritage crime. Important bit is to try and stop it in the first place. So it's that preventative side. Part of my designing out crime role, I went along to a number of security exhibitions over the years, and one of the things that I made an effort to do is try and identify security products out there that are compatible with the heritage environment, not just in relation to archaeology, but other sectors. So I made a contact with the Institute of Historic Building Conservationists, IHBC, and there was an interest there in that. And so with Secured by Design, which is the police preferred enabler in relation to security, they have what's called a police preferred product list. So a little project that was done was trying to identify products that are on that list that are compatible to the heritage environment. Now, looking at archaeology side, if you've got a archaeological site that is particularly important, there are redeployable and rental fencing systems out there that have a loss prevention service certification to it. And so perhaps it would be helpful to actually have a list of products, so when people are faced with trying to put some preventative measures in place, they know that they're suitable to that environment. The only other quick thing I was going to put in there, looking at your list, I presume you're looking at that in relation to archaeological sites as opposed to heritage crime in general. The reason I say that is when I was looking at the list of museums, that they had half a circle or a blank circle in relation to preserving evidence. Now, one of the things when I deliver presentations to the museum sector is to point out if they are subject of a crime, is how they can actually preserve that crime scene for the scenes of crime officer, which in one of my other hats I wore before I came into designing Act Crime was a scenes of crime officer. And there it's keen to actually make sure that nothing that they do after a crime is to the detriment of recovering that evidence that might lead us to the offenders.
Yeah,
I'm sorry if I've waffled on.
No, it's really useful. I think we had in our heads it was kind of archaeological sites, listed buildings, things like that. But that's a very valuable point that you've made about museums can also be the victim of heritage crime as well. So the matrices are kind of very much in draft, so we can, quite happy to kind of like amend them and add things in, and especially when we come to put together the skills matrix for CIFA.
No, I think they're brilliant. I'd had a look on the previous publication that you put out, and yeah, brilliant. A lot of work gone into that. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Paul, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack there that's really useful, Stephen. I think the idea of a list, or perhaps linking and signposting to a list that's already approved, by the police is certainly something to look at. In terms of the training and the level for the for museums, I think it's interesting. What we need to unpack are that we've got those kind of three. For people who've been around a while, it reminds me of that television advert: full moon, half moon, no moon. So I'd see a Jaffa cake rather than the moon there, but other biscuits are available. But I think that middle one is the awareness. That's exactly what's needed by everybody in a museum. So it's exactly that, as you say, Stephen, to know what to do, who to call, and what not to do. It's the full level is for the person who would then be investigating it, going on potentially. So, and I think that leads to my question to the room, but to you as well, Ash. We've had people talking about, Mark and others talking about those kind of formal qualifications, and that's great, and moving towards those is a key part of this. But I think there's a really important part about the kind of the bite-sized modular CPD training in very specific subjects that people can pick and mix and build their own portfolio depending on what their role is and where they sit. And I suppose this leads back to your questions to the room, really, is we need to put some together, and we want to put some together. So what I'm keen to know is, at this point in time, which of those subject areas would people find useful, or where do they think at the moment there is a gap in their knowledge that will be useful for us to address, so that we put on events that are useful to people and cover knowledge gaps, rather than putting on something that perhaps isn't as necessarily of the moment, or isn't a skill that's missing.
I think just to come in on that, because one of the things that we found in the audit is actually there are very few courses on a CPD level about what heritage crime actually is, and how to report it and how to find out what to do and things like that. So I think from my point of view, one of the key kind of courses we should be looking at is an introductory course, so that people know what it is, they know how to recognize it. And it's not just for, us archaeologists or police officers or things like that, but, being able to push it out to the wider public, through CBA and things like that. And develop a kind of the other side of the confident contact, frame, so people automatically, they can go, oh, that's heritage crime, this is how I report it, you know, and that kind of thing. So I think from my point of view, I think that's probably a key one we should definitely be looking at. And I think as well, from a heritage professional point of view, I think having something on securing and preserving evidence, so drawing on what Stephen said, you know, is knowing what to do if you're dealing with a crime scene, a heritage crime scene, knowing what to do before, you know, while the police are on their way, or while the you know, crime scene officer is coming and the forensic team are coming out, is actually knowing what to do. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 pennies worth.
Paul, when we commissioned the work, it was very much about built historic environment, terrestrial and maritime. When Andy Bliss was in the chair for the National Police Chiefs Council, he brought his knowledge and expertise around museums, art galleries, places that are repositories for objects and artifacts, which was an area I don't really have any skills in. So by putting heritage and cultural property crime together, clearly they are one topic, but they're very distinct. So I think maybe if we were going to do the exercise again, now that the program has matured even more, we might just take a look at it and say, okay, well, let's have a look at Andy Bliss's review of Heritage Watch, so that we bring in all 400,000 owners and managers and see how we can develop that outreach for them. So I think I totally agree with Ash that course one is, what is it? How do I recognize it? And who do I need to tell if something happens? Maybe the second bit is more around a person's role and what they actually do. So, for example, field archaeologists, they're going to start work next week on a site. What do they need to do in terms of preventative measures? How do they engage with their local neighbourhood policing team? Those types of things. So I think it really bodes well.
It's really interesting. And on the museums side, as I mentioned in my introduction, we do have an article early next year and in the Society of Museum Archaeologists magazine, and we're also quite keen about, so for those in the room who haven't heard this before, we are putting together a number of working groups, and one of those working groups hopefully will start to sort of focus on the area of museums, and will, you know, hopefully again draw more museum archaeologists into both this group and hopefully also CIFA, because they are not particularly well represented. There are a number, but it's an area with lots of crossover that's very key. That's been really helpful, Ash, and if people have thoughts, do let us have them. We will also be putting together a survey, and training will be covered within that. Paul, you've got your hand up, Paul Kelly.
Yeah, it was just a quick point on that notion of training people how to, for want of a better phrase, process sites, what to do at a site that where there's been a crime, but you put it under a heritage banner. It also then means that you need further research on many of the forensic aspects associated with that. So, for example, something I've talked to Mark before about now is it might be extremely difficult to get some aspects of forensic data from a stone surface, but if that stone has recently been painted on, then the question becomes, does that preserve a lot more from fingerprints or whatever? So there also needs to be some real sort of fundamental research there into just what can be done at various sites in various situations. The other point as well, just I saw one there was youth engagement, and I'm just wondering, it's a bit off topic, but to what extent has work been done to show whether promoting the notion of heritage sites and what might constitute a heritage site, etc., actually reduces the likelihood of those kind of attacks. So Mark talked earlier about that building and saying, well, was this just a blank canvas? Were they doing it because they knew they were being extra naughty, if you like, because it's a heritage site? That's a sort of interesting question. I don't know to what extent any work's been done on that.
Yeah.
Can you educate people into the situation?
You want me to come back on that?
Yes, please, Mark. Yeah.
Okay. So just before we didn't know the pandemic was going to come up, we developed a program with the volunteer police cadets. Every police service in the country now has to have what they call a citizens in policing program. In the past, I suppose they were called volunteers. So these people might be the volunteer to look after the front counter in a police station. They might wash police cars, run neighbourhood watch. And police cadets used to be a way of recruiting young people that maybe weren't going to go on and do A-levels. And they'd be a police cadet for a couple of years to see if they would want to join the police when they were 18 and a half. But that model finished around about 1990. And around about 1994, it came back, but in a way that was very similar to sort of scouts and boys and girls brigades, those sea cadets, those types of things, where children, young people would do a couple of hours a week. They'd be in uniform. They would work towards badges and things like that. So we developed a program with the police cadets, and we had it externally evaluated by Northampton University's policy team, who I'd worked with on many occasions before. And the evaluation was overwhelmingly positive, which gave us the confidence then to go on to work with the umbrella organisation for 11 of the uniform youth groups in Britain, called Youth United Foundation. And they used to be based in the Cabinet Office, but now they're a standalone charity. And they look after 1.5 million children and young people that go to a uniform youth group. We asked them to go out and find out who else would like to work with the sector, not just Historic England. And they've come back, and 27 groups would like to integrate heritage, not just crime, but heritage into their work programs. So if I just share my screen quickly, Paul.
Yep.
And that's now formally known as the Heritage Youth Partnership. And those cadets and their leaders, there is a prize here if you can identify the building behind them. Nobody? Okay, so it's Deal Castle. It's one of the Henrician castles in East Kent. And the cadets are doing a heritage marathon, Paul. They walked 26 miles. They visited 26 heritage sites in the Dover district, and they raised money for local charities. So these are children, young people between 13 and 18, and many of them are now going on to the world of work, apprenticeships, using their cadetships for personal statements to go to university. But of course, it's still a little bit exclusionary, because even though it's 1.5, nearly 2 million young children, young people now, we've extended the package to a wider partnership. And here's some brownies doing their shield work up in Lancashire. We need to find out a way that we can reach out to nearly all children and young people across the country, and their caring parents and caring groups as well. Because the more people that know about what's in their local area, the more chance they're going to value it, look after it, and tell us if there's something wrong. And that's where the heritage cadets is the next strand in this. So it's not historic England cadets, it's those cadets in the police and the fire service that are going to do some extra work with us to get their heritage cadet patch.
That's excellent. Thank you, Mark. And I think again, there's lots to think about. That's a really interesting question about how do we reach the children who aren't part of that. And you're right. I think schools seems like the obvious route, but obviously there's a lot of competition there in terms of matching things to the national curriculum. But I'm sure it's something that can be done.
Doable.
Yeah,
and of course,
absolutely.
HE has tested this with the Heritage Schools program, but that's currently focused at primary schools.
Yeah.
Now, I would be the first one to say the earlier you get a child and young person understanding, the better. And I think in the sector, we do sort of trumpet things where, 15,000 people turned up to an event and classify it as a success. Well, it's generally the same people that are coming. Children and young people in sort of nurtured family setups. It's the ones that don't get a chance. And that is hard. As a community archaeologist, and the work that we do down here in East Kentpool is to reach out to children that live in category A areas of deprivation. That's hard. And Tom, if he was on the call now, he would be talking about Cornwall being very deprived and how we can use heritage as that enabler, which in the longer term can lead to a crime reduction dividend.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting and but opens up a much bigger challenge and issue for another time, I think, as well. I'm mindful that we only have a few minutes left now. That's been a really useful discussion. As I said, we will be putting a survey together on a range of things, including training in this. So watch this space. And thank you. I noticed some of the discussion in the comments and sort of meetings will happen going forward. Does anybody have any final questions about anything today or anything that hasn't been covered today, broadly related to heritage crime, or any observations on what we've covered before we close and allow everyone to get away for lunch?
I think maybe one thing I would say is what seems to come from this is the real need to get that phrase out and get the understanding of it. It's still something that, when I talk to other colleagues on campus and so on, it's not a phrase that they're familiar with. And whatever way, whether it's documentaries of people in the area or something like that builds a bit of momentum to actually define and publicize that phrase heritage crime. It seems to me is the real key point. So you're not just preaching to the converted, you're actually getting that phraseology out there, and as I say, from an academic perspective, what its requirements are.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and is obviously at the core of what we need to do going forward. And I think again, it's something that all of us can do. So it's having that minute in the lift with somebody, you at every opportunity, get it out there, talk to people about it, take opportunities to promote it, to put articles in, things that you're doing, and do check our page. There are resources there, but there are people within the committee and within the wider group who are more than happy to provide information, material, links, support. And as Mark said, I think going back to the archaeological site, one of the key things, whether it's museums, archaeological sites, privately owned properties, it's helping people to realise that in all police forces there are now heritage crime liaison officers, and to help them to make those links, to invite those officers to come along to their site or their premises, you know, for a cup of tea, to have a look around it, to give that advice on prevention, but also so that they're aware that it's there, and building those relationships, and those relationships can then build with communities. So I think it's a really good point, and it's on all of us to be doing that at every opportunity. Okay, in the final moments, anybody, any final questions or observations before I thank you all and let you all go?